Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Reese. I'm about to launch into a bit of a lecture on how you can and should challenge a speed cam, a scam cam ticket at the Parking Violations Bureau in Buffalo. It's President's Day morning, about 10:30, and hopefully this won't take too long, but initially, what I want to talk about is what your attitude has got to be when you go to the Parking Violations Bureau. Most people are beaten into submission by authority and the rules of our society today. And you've got to shake that off. You've got to become rough, tough, and mean and question everything. Quo warranto, question authority. You cannot allow the hearing officer, who will likely also act as the prosecutor in this matter, which is outrageous and totally unethical. You cannot allow this individual to assume this dual role without complaining continuously about it. And if you're successful enough, you'll actually stop them from doing it. At some point, the process just can't work. This is broken from the beginning. Now, just a little bit of explanation. In the traditional system of Anglo-Saxon jurisprudence, an adversarial tribunal is a three-part game. There is the prosecutor, the defense, and an impartial judge, magistrate, hearing officer of some sort, who will hear the evidence and render an impartial decision. It is completely unethical for the hearing officer or judge to assist either the prosecution or the defense. In so doing, the judge would effectively become an agent of the prosecution or the defense, and you just can't do it ethically. It doesn't work under our system, which we've had in place for about 600 years. So don't allow the hearing officer, who will assume that he can make the city's case, to make the city's case. Now, there's only one person in the room. There's going to be an audio recording. How do you make sure the prosecutor or the hearing officer doesn't become the prosecutor? How could this system work without two people in the room? The city won't have a prosecutor there. Well, if the city had a stack of documents that were sufficient to prove the entire case as required by the statute, 1180D of the Vehicle and Traffic Law, that would be fine. But what you're going to find is that they're not even close. They perhaps won't have anything other than the citation, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and the information that's on it. This just isn't enough to sustain a prosecution or a conviction or a finding of guilty under the Vehicle and Traffic Law. So your attitude from the beginning has got to be, I'm challenging everything. And I don't have to prove the prosecution's case. That's not my job. I don't have to ask the prosecution to have things in court ahead of time. And you'll find hearing officers that'll ask you to do that. And that's preposterous. That's their job, not mine. I'm just here to make sure that you guys get it right. So if you've looked on our website, you'll see that we have a checklist for challenging the speed enforcement cams, the scam cam deal here. And we also have the annotated statute. If you look at, and you should probably have both in your hands when you go in there. If you look at this, we're starting with the very first thing is, why is there a speed cam there? Under the statute, is there allowed to be one there? The city is only allowed to put these things in place where there's justification based on prior speed data, crash histories, and road geometry, which I call pathways, which we'll get into further. And perhaps I can make some videos available online for this. There is apparently no connection between the criteria that the city had to choose in designating these particular areas as speed cam areas. And the analysis done by community advocate Peter Rizzo clearly indicates the only thing they considered was how they were going to make the maximum amount of money. How are they going to get the most fines? Best example, and an example that I'll use today for illustration, is the camera in, but it's actually not even in front of, it's located near St. Joe's, a Catholic school on Main Street next to UB. And we'll use that for purposes of illustration. But some of the questions. Is there an exit or entrance to the school on the street where the camera is? If there's not, city's out. That's it. Ball game. Ask the hearing officer where the speed data and crash history is that justifies location of a camera there. They won't have it. They're not familiar with the school, by the way, so they don't know where the entrances and exits are. That's their problem. That's for them to prove. The pathways or geometry, as referred to in the statute, essentially involves the concept that whoever drove this vehicle through the kill zone of the speed camera and got a ticket had to have proper notice of the fact that the speed had changed from the city's 30-mile-an-hour normal limit to 15 miles an hour in that particular school zone. It's not your job to prove how the car got there. Now, this gets in a little bit to the bizarre nature of what's going on here. The city is attempting to use robotic cameras to give moving violations, and serious moving violations. Let's face it, speeding in a school zone is a serious violation of the law. They're giving these tickets not to a person, but to somebody's car. So your car is getting this violation, whether you were driving it or not. Not your job to prove who was driving the car. Not your job to prove that the individual driving the car got there via a path where they couldn't see proper signage, where there wasn't proper notice of the change in speed from 30 to 15. It's the city's job to do that. Well, guess what? They can't possibly do that. If there were a cop with a radar gun there who was doing this in the normal traditional fashion, first off, you wouldn't be in the Parking Violations Bureau, you'd be in the Moving Violations Bureau. But under any circumstances, that police officer could perhaps give testimony that says, yeah, he went by the flashing lights. And for instance, the St. Joe's situation, the flashing lights are south of Winspear on Main Street. If you're coming north on Main Street, and the lights are on and the camera's on, perhaps you get a ticket there. So you get a flashing light, but that is south of Winspear. Now, Winspear is probably the best example I can give you in the entire city. Somebody who turns left or right off of Winspear will not see a speed change sign until they have a ticket. The first sign they're going to see is right in front of the Cantilation Center, which is where the kill zone is for the speed cam, which is goofy in and of itself. St. Joe's, the school, is further north on Main Street, but for some reason or other, the city has decided it wants to guard the Cantilation Center, former Cantilation Center, which is now, in fact, an abandoned building. So, I mean, this is a no-brainer from the start. There's probably at least a half a dozen ways that one can get into the kill zone of the speed cam in front of St. Joe's if you're leaving the city going north, where you did not see a reduction in speed to 15 miles an hour until you had a ticket. All right, that's craziness. That's grounds for an immediate dismissal. Whether you get it or not is, anybody's guess. The hearing officers are picked because they're friends of Kevin Helfer, the parking commissioner, and that seems to be the sole qualification. They probably don't keep their jobs unless they find a lot of people guilty and generate revenue for the city, because after all, that's what Commissioner Helfer's job is, to generate revenues. And that's the purpose of this statute, generating revenues to try to fill the $80 million hole that Mayor Brown has blown in his budget. So, in order to try to fix this, the city tried to do a retroactive repair, and it actually has gotten silly. I probably need to post a video on this, but let me try to describe it. If you're traveling on Winspear from west to east, you'll come upon a sign before the stoplight on Main Street. First, there's going to be a rectangular, but it's really a diamond because it's set on an edge, orange sign that has a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit sign in it and an arrow that says straight ahead. This sign is intended to warn you. It's a warning sign only. It's not notification of 15 miles an hour. It's intended to warn you that there's a 15-mile-an-hour speed zone straight ahead because the arrow says straight ahead. If you continue driving on Winspear, the next speed sign you'll see is a 30-mile-an-hour city speed limit sign. And you're going to say to yourself, what am I, crazy? Or was the city crazy? Or was the person drunk to put up this signage? Well, if you go back and look at the signage as I have, underneath it, there's a speed zone camera. And written underneath that in type, and a font that's too small for anybody driving a car to see, it says on Main Street. So it's saying somewhere up ahead on Main Street, there's a 15-mile-an-hour speed zone. Is it left? Is it right? Who knows? You know, I can go either way from Winspear. It's totally inadequate. There might be a way to fix that sign, but not my job to figure that out. And in essence, the speed zone that's 15 miles ahead or 15 miles an hour up ahead is you crossing Main Street and not knowing that you're in a 15-mile-an-hour zone because the flashing light speed zone warning sign is to your right at that point, and you're passing behind it. You never see it. Now, that sign needs to be at least a quarter mile from the school zone, and it's probably a couple hundred yards, so the sign's inadequate anyhow. It's just one thing after another here that's wrong. So even if I testified, well, I turned left off of Winspear on a Main Street, and the first sign I saw that said 15 miles an hour is where my car got a ticket. See, it's right there next to the car in the picture. No, that can't support a conviction. That's all there is to it. Blind, drunk, crazy, that's the only way you get a conviction given that. So pathways and geometry is extremely important. There's one way that you can get in front of the St. Joe's School, by the way. Just this is an interesting point. I think it's either off Merrimack or Heath. You can turn left onto Main Street, and you are already north of the kill zone for the speed cam. But you're going to pass right in front of St. Joe's School, and you can be doing 150 miles an hour if your car will accelerate that fast in front of the St. Joe's School without any chance that you'll ever get a speed zone ticket because the camera's way off to your right at that point in time. The geometry argument just doesn't work here. It doesn't work in general in urban areas. Now, where could these speed zone cams work? If you had them on a New York State thruway, which is limited access, and everybody knows in general you're supposed to be doing 65 miles an hour, and a speed cam clocks you doing 80, guess what? You had notice, you knew you were supposed to be doing 65, you're dead. Every argument that I've made so far is out the window. But in that particular case, you're nailed. All right, well, that situation does not obtain anywhere in an urban area. It's not just Buffalo, it's anywhere where it's urbanized. The regulations for speed zones and for these cams are apparently laid out for schools out in the country where there's a country road with limited access, maybe a few driveways and a quarter mile either way to put up a speed change sign makes some sense. In the city of Buffalo, there are probably over 100 schools in the city of Buffalo. If you put a quarter mile radius out from every entrance or exit of a school in the city of Buffalo, drew it on a map, the entire city of Buffalo is a school speed zone. Now, the Common Council has said that there's only going to be These cameras can only be operating during the arrival and departure times for the schools, which would probably mean 7:30 to 9:30 in the morning, 2:30 to 4:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes other times when the school requests it, but that generally would be it. Well, that's rush hour in the city of Buffalo, and effectively what this means is that the rush hour speed limit in the city of Buffalo is 15 miles an hour. That's just nuts. It's totally unworkable, and nobody thought this through. And the more they try to fix it, the more they try to tweak it, the worse it gets, because the system doesn't work. Diatribe over. All right, now, looking at the citation in general, the statute requires a whole bunch of things. One of them is that there has to be a camera ID number on it. Now, thousands of these things apparently went out with a camera ID in the box here saying null. Now, that ain't a camera number. That's no way to ID the camera. Why do I need to ID the camera? Because the statute requires an annual certification of the accuracy of this camera and a daily startup record, which indicates the camera was functioning properly when it turned it on in the morning. The statute requires that. Now, that's not Pete, that's the statute. City wants to make its case, it's got to show you the annual calibration record and the startup. They won't be able to. I had a hearing where the hearing officer actually left the room to try to come up with these certifications, couldn't do it. And basically said to me, and this is laughable, oh, I had to foil that ahead of time. To which my response is, no, that's no way. I don't have to prosecute myself. The city prosecutes this case, not Pete. You know, if you want to pay me to prosecute it, I'll turn over my defense mantle and make more money being a prosecutor, but you don't have one. And your prosecutor, who apparently is you, cannot make the case because you don't have the information necessary as is required by the statute. So there's two things that are dead there. So it's important to have the camera number, and it's important to have the certification information. Well, Cavett Chambers, who is some sort of assistant corporation counsel, at some point said to the Common Council, well, the speed zone cam is in the bottom of the ID of the cam is in the bottom. Now, I'm 76 years old. This number is so small that I cannot read it without a magnifying glass. This is just crazy. And there is a number here. It might be the speed zone cam number, but it's different from the one that's supposed to be over here in the camera ID box. So which one is it? Is the one over on a picture, or is it this one here? That alone, the inconsistency is enough to ask for this to be thrown out. It should be thrown out. But under any sane reading of the statute, you're going to have a camera ID in here. You better have a camera ID somebody can read. Now, I actually asked the hearing officers to read the camera ID, and he couldn't read it off of the copy of the citation he had. That's how small and how poorly it was. The photocopier. I handed him my citation at his request, which was him becoming a prosecutor, by the way. And I think in the future, I'll just tell him to blow it off. No, thank you. Prosecute your own case, sir. Somehow or other, he was able to make out some of these numbers, but I can't. I mean, I can't read them. And if I put a magnifying glass on this or a microscope, I might be able to make it out. Now, by way of a reference on what you need to do by readability, the civil practice laws and rules of New York State for consumer contracts require that something be in 8-point type or it is not admissible in evidence, i.e., if you have a contract in 7-point type, don't try to enforce it because the court won't look at it. This is maybe 1-point type. It's hard to know how small it is. It may be half-point type. This is just not a legal notification of somebody as is required by the statute. So that argument is just plain crazy. And unfortunately, I'm paying somebody, at corporation counsel a substantial amount of money to come up with really dumb excuses for why this sort of thing is happening. By the way, I have had citations thrown out by the hearing officer with the reason given that the camera ID was not there. Now, thousands of these things were issued. Thousands of them were undoubtedly paid by people, maybe even people who asked for a hearing and weren't able to get it because they didn't realize what they had to do under the statute. Every single one of the citations the city of Buffalo has issued that's got a null camera in this little ID box here rather than the proper number should be thrown out. They should be thrown out retroactively. People should be returned their money. There isn't any question about that in my mind. Going along further on the check sheet here, there has to be evidence that the camera passes self-test functions that day. They don't have it. There needs to be a copy made available of the most recent annual calibration. They won't have it. There needs to be a copy of the operator's daily setup log for the system that he operates. It should have the date, the time, location, etc. when it was set up. That's in the statute. City of Buffalo expects us to obey the law. City of Buffalo's got to obey the law. There's got to be evidence that the operator successfully performed and the system passed the self-tests. That's in the statute. Once again, I mean, I didn't write the law. City and some lobbyists who were paid a lot of money by Census Gatso, the vendor of the camera, paid lobbyists over $200,000. Their lobbyists probably wrote this law that we're looking at here. They paid Cahill Strategies, Albany lobbyists, plenty of money to come up with these 5 pages so that they could hose our wallets here in Buffalo. Strict compliance with the statute is required. Why not? You wrote it, not me. Okay, for people who are the operators, you'll see in the corner of the citation down here, there's some sort of scratchy signature, and there's supposed to be an ID number for the employee. The ID number for the employee is almost never there. That's a throwaway because I can't tell from this scratchy signature who this was. But the person who's the operator needs to complete training procedures. We need proof at the hearing that whoever operated this, whoever this magical person here who allegedly put these scratches on here, actually, is properly trained. And if they don't show up or they can't prove who that person is, they're out because under the statute, it says this person can certify the accuracy of the records. Unfortunately, under the law of New York, the only people who can certify documents on their own without having a witness statement signed before a notary are lawyers, physicians, chiropractors, veterinarians, and dentists. My guess is these people aren't notaries or physicians or chiropractors or veterinarians who maybe were trained to sign this. So that's a throw out too. The city has a heavy burden here. You don't have any burden at all. Understand that. And don't be afraid to challenge it. And if the hearing officer says, oh, I got to go get that. No, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. Now you're the prosecutor. No, you can't do that. You're not ready to proceed. You don't have it here. I want this thrown out right now. And who are you, hearing officer? Are you the prosecutor or the hearing officer? How can you be both? I mean, get right in their face, make a record of it, make sure it's on the tape. Most people aren't designed to be as confrontational as lawyers are supposed to be, and certainly as I am. Do I look like somebody who is easily intimidated by a hearing officer? He said. So you have to reach inside yourself, eat a pound of raw meat that morning, have 6 cups of black coffee, and be ready to go. But that's the job of a lawyer. Now, the background of me doing this is I'm an old fossil, and I remember the days when we actually had to try speeding tickets that were given to people in the normal course, where it was a police officer who clocked you driving down the street or hit you with a radar cam. And our job was to challenge the police officers. And this is the sort of thing we walked through with the officer. If the officer got you with a radar gun, you had to say, well, that's a KYBX99 radar gun. When was the last time it was calibrated? Do you know how to operate it, officer? Can you show us your training certificate? When did you last take a refresher class, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the newer system, which you're going to see in town justice courts and city courts, there is an actual prosecutor. The cop will show up. He will have to testify to this, but you don't bother because the town prosecutor is going to give you a deal to a parking ticket or two. It's going to cost you $250, $300. And rather than risk the likelihood of a conviction by a trained police radar gun operator, you're going to take the deal. That's what you get a lawyer for. You can negotiate that deal yourself, but it'll happen faster if you have a lawyer. And I make money doing that, and my friends make money doing that. So you want to consider that. Now, unfortunately, with a $50 fine, you're not going to get a lawyer for $50. Even I don't work that cheap. I'm working free on these right now because I want this system gone. It can't work. It's way too complex. There's too many holes in it. And to give you an example, people have thrown out the red light cam. Everybody despises red light cams. This system's 100 times more complex than red light cams. Think about it. If you run through a red light, how much signage do you need? How much notice do you need? You see a red light up ahead, everybody who's driving a car knows they're not supposed to run a red light. Who cares how you got there? You were in the intersection, you ran a red light. Okay, all of the arguments that I make or that I would make at a hearing are out the window with a red light cam. Or one of these things that's on a controlled access highway. I mean, they could probably get away with putting these things somewhere on the 33, if they made sure that you went by a speed zone sign, when you got on, that there was one up the road from them. This just doesn't work. It can't work in an urban area. It's got too many holes. It's organically flawed. Nobody thought out the law, either in writing it or in the implementation of it. And to throw the word geometry in there and then give this to the commissioners in the city of Buffalo is madness. Now, there's another point that recently came up, and it's a great one. If you look at the city ordinance that establishes school zones, it talks about designated school zones. Designated by whom? Well, I would say that a reasonable interpretation of that city ordinance is it's designated by the city. Who's the city? The city is the mayor and the common council. It's not Commissioner Helfer. Mayor Brown's not a king. Commissioner Helfer's not the king. Either is Public Works Commissioner Finn, who apparently is responsible for the signage in this fiasco that doesn't work. The Common Council had nothing to do in the designation of these. I think this may be illegal in its inception. There has already been a lawsuit generated challenging the designation of one of these because it was picked because there's a daycare center on a street, an entrance or an exit. Daycare centers are not schools. Commissioner Helfer read something to the Common Council, which he claimed made daycare centers a school. The definition of a school he was reading was from the New York State regs that define a school bus, not a school for the purposes of speed zone cams. So once again, Commissioner Helfer, the money grubber, is full of baloney. He's not a lawyer. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'm certainly hoping that the city loses that case. It's the Montefiore, which I believe is down on William Street. Because the camera that's set up on Bailey Avenue is not set up by a school. They're calling it a school, which it's not. And the justification for the camera there retroactively is there's a daycare center there. Now, that in and of itself is pretty absurd. My understanding is like kids from 6 months to 4.5 months go to daycare centers. Well, they don't cross the street. They don't walk to school. I have not seen any 6-month-old kids crossing Bailey Avenue lately. And if they do, I certainly hope that the crossing guards give them proper escort across the street. But this whole thing is getting more and more preposterous by the minute. The city can't back it up. And our beloved mayor seems to have taken it upon himself now to attack people personally who are challenging this nonsense that he's created. And perhaps that's a very good reason for one to consider another alternative in the mayoral election, which is coming up, which he has not declared for yet. All right, now we're going to go into a little show and tell movie time. Something that I wanted to add in to the first part of presentation. Under the statute, there's timeliness of getting your citation. Under the law, one must get a citation mailed to them, postmarked, by no more than 14 days, business days, post the date of the incident. That can be a little tricky because holidays don't count in business days, so be careful in counting that. When you're counting your days, the day of the incident doesn't count, then you count 14 days off, and by the 14th day they have to send out the notice. So your envelope should be postmarked within 14 days, but a lot of people don't keep the envelope. Most people, I would guess, don't. I certainly don't. So one of the things you're going to want to ask the hearing officer first thing is, okay, was notice sent timely? Last time I did this, the hearing officer basically left the room to go look it up on a computer. Now, when the hearing officer takes any action to prove the case, as far as I'm concerned, that's the hearing officer becoming a player, a prosecutor in the case, and that should be the end of it. But anyhow, the fellow comes back and he says, well, notice was sent timely. I said, good, bring it in here. I want to see proof of it. Well, I can't. It's on a computer system. I said, well, bring the computer system in here. Well, I can't do that. So I said, good, I want a dismissal. Notice is not timely. You haven't got proof of it. And there's none of this nonsense about the hearing officer can see it, but you can't. This is not double secret probation from, Dean Wormer in the movie Animal House. If they're presenting evidence, they got to present evidence. You're there in the hearing room, you want to see it. They don't have it, they can't show it. Notice is not timely. The statute says they can use a computer or a manual log. Good, let them show it to you. That's their obligation, not yours. This guy is making nonsense arguments like I had to foil it ahead of time, ask for this. No, that's nonsense. No, I don't have to ask for anything. That's their job, not mine. He's the prosecutor, hearing officer. I don't have to prosecute myself. You don't have to produce anything. It's all the weight, all the loads on them. You have a right to ask for it, demand it. If they don't have it, then it's a dismissal. And anything else is nonsense. So understand that. Now let's get into some videos here. I've got one here which is kind of fun. This is me biking by in the summer, giving the NFTA a little gas. And hopefully this will show well. But I wanted to demonstrate that the St. Joe's first warning sign, the one in front of the Candlesian Center, was totally obstructed this summer. So you couldn't even see it even if you drove by it. You'd have to be looking for it and find it in order to drive by and see it. Watch this video. All right, that's the old abandoned Candlesian Center. Bus driver here is giving me some gas, tooting at me, telling me to get out of the way. I'm saying, hey, pal, leave me alone. So you see the bus driver try to run me off the road here. Anyhow, the sign is up ahead in that group of trees. Now, I'm pedaling my bike with a video, driving down the road at about 8 miles an hour. And you'll see here that you just can't see the bloody thing. All right, Pete, move along. Okay, now I'm looking for it. I think you can see the base of it there. Watch this. Watch this. There it is. There it is. There's the sign. Finally, you're right next to it. Nobody ever sees that driving. That's just complete and utter nonsense. So let's go to our next video. I want to show you the Heath speed demon situation here. What I'm attempting to do with this one, whoops, I guess I got to rewind my video. Okay, I've rewound the video. I'm coming up Heath. And what you're looking at over on, directly ahead is the church, slightly to the left is the school. Now, we're on foot here. As we come up, you're going to see there is a no turn on red sign. There seems to be some sort of warning sign here that says, be careful of pedestrians crossing if you're turning right. That's it. So you're moving up. Now, understand that the speed cam, the kill zone, is totally to your right at this point. See St. Joe's School there? If I put the hammer down with a sports car, I can be doing as fast as I can go when I cross in front of St. Joe's. No chance that I'll be hit with a speed cam because it's over to my right. I've already passed it. Absurd placement of speed cam, which, by the way, the cams, now I'm looking down that way. There's the flashing light. If you look in the distance, you can see the cam on the pole in the back of the other sign, the abandoned Citation Center. This is just nonsense. What they did was they put the cameras up where they had poles. They didn't bother to put poles where they needed cameras. So, I mean, this whole thing is junk. I want to show you one here, which is the Merrimack speed trap. All right, now here we're coming up Merrimack. That's the old abandoned Citation Center there, straight ahead. Some other funny stuff here. If you look back behind, there's no signage whatsoever for a speed zone on Merrimack. So you have no idea you're approaching a speed zone. The wind spear is off to your right. The flashing light is way off to your right. And we're going to turn left up ahead, which is legal here, off of Merrimack. That's the Citation Center. On the pole there, slightly to the left, is the speed cam. You have no idea coming off Merrimack that you're approaching a speed cam. You cut around a corner once you can get in here. And boom. There's the sign. You're in the kill zone. If you're doing 30 miles an hour, which is what the speed limit was on Merrimack, that's it. You're done. I mean, this makes no sense. There's a speed zone sign up in the alleyway up ahead, which is really goofy. I mean, nothing here makes any sense at all. This is just crazy world here. So you can clearly get into the kill zone from Merrimack by taking a left onto Main Street and get a ticket. Okay, now I'm going to want to show you the wind spear trap, and I'm going to have to horse with this one a little bit. All right, stop it. Move the cursor back to the beginning. All right. Yeah, that's too far back. Come on, let's get where we want to be. Well, I just did a run through here of driving by normally. Okay, now I'm coming up a side street which leads to Windspear here. If you'll bear with me a second. So I'm coming up a side street. That's Windspear you're going to see up ahead past the stop sign. So I have to stop for a stop sign, and this is one of their sign fixes. and I think you're going to see it doesn't work. Okay, I have to stop there. Now I'm pulling ahead. Now I'm coming up onto Windspear. Now, the fake signage that I want to tell you, the bad signage, there it is. Okay, what you're seeing is a warning sign with an arrow straight ahead that says there's a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit coming up. Next sign underneath that tells you what hours it's operating. And then there's a little camera underneath that. And I'll try to move up a little bit here. If you look at the camera sign underneath there, and I'm gonna try to rewrap a little bit, go by that again. If you look under the little camera, it says on Main Street. And there's no way in the world anybody driving is going to see this. I mean, this is just craziness here. You see, I'm just by it there. Look at, if you look at that closely, you can see under the little camera, it's over to the right, that it says on Main Street. I mean, that's just goofiness. All right, now I'm coming up to the light here, and I'm going to pause. At this light on account of I can't run lights. And I'll try to move the cursor up a little bit so that we don't have to wait for the whole red light, and there's a big truck I can't drive through. And move a little more, and come on, red light, change. All right, I've turned left. Now I'm headed out towards St. Joe's. So I'm on Merrimack. Suddenly I'm in a speed zone. You can see they trimmed some branches off the tree there, so it's easier to find that. But you can see you get killed in the speed zone on Merrimack, not doing anything. And this is just goofy world here. Now, here's me coming up Merrimack again, coming up Windspear again. And if I'm going to stop it here, I've just gone by on Windspear a camera, or excuse me, a sign which told me there's a speed zone up ahead. And the first sign that I see when I cross Main Street, looking for that speed zone up ahead, it says 30 miles an hour. And I'm saying, were we drunk, on drugs, were we crazy? What? I didn't see any speed zone. Well, the speed zone I was apparently being warned of was on Main Street, but it says straight ahead. I just drove straight ahead on Windspear, and I seek in vain for another speed zones here. So the signage doesn't work. It can't work. None of this stuff makes any sense. And my voice is getting foggy from doing all this, so I'm going to try to put this video up now, and hopefully it will be of some value to the people who watch it. What I recommend that you do with your tickets is ask for a hearing, go down to the hearing and kick some ass. Make the city prove their case, because they can't. And barring that, I wouldn't pay any of these fines, because I think this whole thing is going to collapse of its own weight. There's not much more I can say of that. Now, this will be on the Facebook page, WNY Field of Dreams. I'm Peter A. Reese. You can reach me via email if you need further information. My email is preese, P-R-E-E-S-E 270 at AOL.com. I hope this video has been of some value to you. It's put up here as a public service. And have a good rest of your President's Day.